When most people think of bias, they think of a negative action taken deliberately. But there are unconscious or implicit biases that can affect your behavior or decisions without you realizing it. Unconscious biases are often based on mistaken, inaccurate, or incomplete information. These biases can have a significant impact on workplaces, shaping who gets recruited, hired, and promoted. Having an unconscious bias doesn't make you a bad person, it just means you're human. It's possible to interrupt bias. The first step is awareness. Below are the most common types of unconscious bias, along with tactics you can use to ensure workplace decisions aren't being guided by them. 1. Affinity bias. It is called like bias. This bias refers to our tendency to gravitate toward people similar to ourselves. That might mean hiring or promoting someone who shares the same race, gender, age, or educational background. How do we undermine this form of bias? Ensure that candidate slates for all open positions include 2 or more qualified women as well as 2 people from other historically excluded racial and ethnic groups. 2. AGEISM. Who is better at technology? Who can learn faster? Anyone with the attitude and willingness to learn. Often these agile attributes are conferred to people's age, thus forming an age-based bias. Ageism tends to affect women more than men, and starts at younger ages. How do we undermine this bias? Remove graduation and work experience dates from the application process. Realize that older workers may bring skills and experiences to the table that younger workers can. 3. Attribution bias. Attributing morality, effectiveness, intelligence, or skills based on any external rationale is an attribution bias. When people make assumptions based on observations about an individual's knowledge, skills, and demonstrated abilities, they may undervalue their accomplishments and overvalue their mistakes. What can we do to undermine this form of bias? Give honest, detailed feedback to all of your direct reports, and tie it to concrete business goals and outcomes. Research shows that feedback given to women tends to be vague and focused on communication style, while men are given specific feedback that tends to be tied to business goals and technical skills that accelerate advancement. 4. Confirmation bias. People who are not open to change will often look for data that confirms what they already believe. This type of bias is most problematic when an individual comes into contact with people, concepts, or beliefs that are outside of their frame of reference. How do we undermine this type of bias? Identify your blind spots. Build your own awareness about unconscious bias. Work to learn and expand your comfort zone. 5. Conformity bias. Groupthink is a version of conformity bias. When this bias is present, there is very little divergence in group members' thoughts or actions. Often members who think differently will be punished with groans or silence. This is very common in group settings. This type of bias diminishes discretionary effort. How do we undermine this bias? Consider using structured interviews and wait to share your thoughts with coworkers until the process is over. In meetings, consider rotating the role of facilitator and note-taking to provide more opportunities for everyone to be heard. 6. Gender bias. The assumption that there is a better or preferred gender and that one knows what each individual's gender is. The thought that some jobs are gender-specific or that phenotypes determine gender. How do we undermine this bias? Use neutral language in job descriptions that don't resonate more with one gender over another. Using gender pronouns in email signatures is an opportunity to invite conversation. When thinking about development opportunities or promotions, try to switch the gender of the person you're thinking about and see if it changes your perception of their readiness. 7. Name bias. As more communities and cultures mingle, we are bound to find names or spellings that are outside of our experience. When one judges a person based on their name and perceived background, this is name bias. What can we do to undermine this form of bias? Remove candidates' names from the application process to ensure you choose people based on their skills and experience, not their perceived background. 8. Weight bias. There are no effective ways to judge a person's effectiveness, intelligence, or morality based on outward appearances. Judging a person negatively because they are larger or heavier is a trap that effective leaders avoid by developing relationships, recognizing personal biases, and addressing people on the basis of their accomplishments. How do we undermine this bias? When making judgments about a person, consider why you believe that your opinion matters, has impact on what others do or who they are. Now that you are aware of the different kinds of unconscious bias, you can start to put systems in place to prevent bias from interfering in your hiring and workplace decisions.